Okay, I called this one that I wanted to talk to you about and think about. I, the fantastic director. I love to paint and to do Japanese calligraphy with a brush. If I stopped for any amount of time, then I'd worry I couldn't remember the order of the strokes. But I didn't have to worry because I'd recall the books on calligraphy, and the advice that was given was, slightly paraphrased here, quote, "It's important to practice writing characters every day. If you don't remember a character you're going to write, don't worry. If you've practiced enough, your hand will remember it." I think this is really good advice because usually we think we are the fantastic director. We pull the strings on body, speech, and mind. In spite of what it seems, we are, however, in a partnership with body, speech, and mind, and with the reality that we inhabit. No matter how much you may study or listen to the Dharma, it always comes down to your physical practice. Because sitting is not only a means to calm yourself, not only a means to bring your mind and body together, and not only to set good habits in motion, but sitting is also creates a space for your body to learn as it is and to interact with the reality that we sit in and with the people we sit with. So we believe that our brain controls body and speech, while our emotions come out of personal history and situations beyond our control. So we think of ourselves as one big brain-moving body, with thoughts and emotions like accessories that we can play with or not, either under control or not. Because of that, we believe we are either a victim or a great mover and shaker like the Wizard of Oz, who controlled everything and therefore he was so important. But remember that the wizard had no power and wanted to leave Oz when he was discovered, because he was all noise and bluff and show. So instead of trying to create a great, inflexible, solitary self, indeed, you could see the relationship of body, speech, and mind as being more like a mutual cooperation between mind, body, and speech, acting either as a united harmonized whole, or as a divided being of many parts acting irresponsibly. Have you ever said or done something that surprised you because you later realized you didn't really intend to do or say that? Or thought something that shocked and embarrassed you even though it was private? Perhaps your physical being was nudging you to wake up to its own intentions for a change, or at least its life and intelligence and potential. So I think the one thing we have to do in this practice is observe thoughts and study emotions and body activity, and notice how each acts on the other. See your body and mind playing together like unruly children or like friends. Become aware of any cooperation between them, and awaken to your body intelligence, awaken to your speech intelligence, awaken to your mind intelligence, and then pay respect to the one who worked with you to make it all possible. Last Friday night in discussion, we talked about Dogen Zenji's Mountains and Water Sutras. We discussed the line, especially, "The mountains are walking." And Peter, after much talk, coined the phrase motionless activity to help the understanding. I thought that was a good phrase to understand what can't be explained in words, and it caused me to think about it a little differently than before. Now I wonder if we can understand the mountains are walking from a mountain's perspective, To use a mountain walking, to us, a mountain walking may be motionless activity, but to a mountain, it may not be motionless. Then I began to think about our activity. Dogen also said that we have to understand our own walking first to understand a mountain walking. In the Genjo Koan, he spoke about the momentary confusion of standing in a boat and seeing the land move before realizing that the boat was moving. I wonder if, however, we saw something of reality truly for one moment. I wonder if we are motionless activities to some perspective, but just not to ours. We have a thought and assume that we thought it. We feel happy and assume that there is a self that felt it. We intend to step and walk forward, and we assume that is true because everything moves away and backwards from us. But perhaps it is just reality we inhabit that cooperates with us. Perhaps from our perspective, everything moves in its natural time, but to another perspective, it may be all motionless activity, like a mountain. Perhaps I think I really need to work on this a bit more, so I'll leave it at this. Thank you. And here is Peter. Do you have any questions or comments? Additions? Suggestions, Mike?
I'll start the ball rolling here. What I got from your talk was kind of a side thought, was that we can't rely on our perceptions to be correct. They're very much influenced by us and what our mental processes and stuff. So that, like a mountain walking, well, that seems like a ludicrous idea, but our perception doesn't allow us to see it, so we don't believe in it. And so I got from your talk that we have to be careful of our perceptions because they're not necessarily correct, but they work with our own library of thoughts and images we have stored in our head. Is that anywhere close to what you were talking about?
Yes, it is. In fact, if you remember in the Heart Suji, it says perceptions also are empty. So our thoughts, our feelings, emotions are empty, and we begin to get that when we sit. But our perceptions about reality are also empty, and we have to wonder where those perceptions come from too, and why we believe them, every one we think.
Yeah, we rely on them, and they help us get through the world, basically. But that's just because it works, but it doesn't mean it's actually the correct view. But it's you kind of use them, but not use them at the same time.
Yeah, it's a kind of survival thing that we all share these same perceptions, but we go against the tide when we start to study what Buddhism is or study ourselves. We stop flowing with the way everything goes, and we turn around and start to think about, what do I really think? What do I really feel? If there's no self and the thoughts are empty, the emotions are empty, then what am I really feeling? What's the difference between what floats casually through my mind and feelings and what is genuine in the way I look at the world and that I haven't just been taught?
Thank you very much. It was a great talk, Jane. Thank you.
Thank you. Doesn't leave much for conversation, does it?
Seems to be a family problem here. Anybody else want to say something? Or help out? Yes.
Spencer?
Yes, Spencer.
Oh, In terms of reality, and the construct of our realities is based on the social contract of our shared experiences in this reality. But, in terms of realities and what we know, we only know what we know. So on the spectrum of realities, just like integers between 0 and 1 could be almost infinite, the realities could be infinite too. So our experience, is empty, but it's based on our shared experience. But the mountain's reality, we don't know. So it's not in the Venn diagram of our experience, but it might be on the spectrum of experience, just as all those infinite integers that we never experience because we mainly deal in whole numbers, right? So all of it being empty, but none of it could be really understood because, this is all a constructed reality, based on language and experience and social contracts, right? Is that sort of what you're saying in some way?
Yes, I think that's true, but you said it a little bit better than I did. But I think it's like, there's a number of colors we can see, and there actually are many more colors that we can't see, but they're very real also. For example, if you use a black light on a stone, you see many other colors. And for example, there's a infrared zone that we don't see very real, and the what is the other
Ultraviolet.
one? Ultraviolet side, which we also don't see, but is there. So there's many things we don't see and exist, but that we take for granted just because we've been told they're so. On the other hand, reality is something that's a very personal experience. And when someone like Dogen Zenji says the mountains are walking, he's not just being poetic. He's talking about experience.
Yeah. Well,
And he says later on, you have to understand your own walking, what your own walking really means to understand what a mountain walking means.
I have to think on that one. I couldn't wrap my head around that one, but I'll sit with that one. But just in terms of the physics of our universe, just dark energy and dark matter, I think, are supposed to make up the majority of the physical universe, but nobody has ever proved they exist. Well, they prove they exist, but nobody can produce them, right? So
Yeah, but
very
Spencer,
similar. Yeah.
you have to throw all that away and just count on your own experience in this case. Nothing else. Don't go by what anybody else says. Just go by what you personally can experience in this. So, for example, Dogen in the Genjo Koan talks about how when you're standing in a boat and it's moving, but you don't realize it, it looks like the land is moving. And then you kind of adjust your thinking suddenly and say, oh, right, the boat is moving. But I sometimes wonder if maybe that's as true in the situation, because our reality is not a dead, inert thing, and we interact with it on a very close range, as it were, so that we don't see how it does, but you can actually test that all the time with what you do, that it does interact with you. And I wondered sometimes if maybe that for that moment that we saw the land moving instead of the boat, we weren't seeing something true for a second, but then we quickly readjusted to our normal thinking. So we assume when we walk, we're moving forward and everything is receding because we're moving forward. We're in intending to motion and we do it. But I'm wondering if from another perspective that we are actually motionless activity like the mountain, but just to our way of thinking, we are moving. Perhaps the mountain sees itself as moving also. We see a completely still activity. I wonder how much of our life is also motionless activity.
Probably most of it.
Not that way. But anyway, I was thinking that is, he sort of gave us an incredible koan because it's not something you can verify with science or books or anybody. You just have to, if you say, well, Dogen was quite honest about his experience, and if he says the mountain is walking, but we can't understand it until we understand our own walking, he's given a very big koan to solve. And it's something we can only solve with personal, true experience, not with what anybody says or read. So I thought it was a really interesting subject. If you want to read more about it, look at the Mountains and Water Sutra, because that's where he writes about it a lot. He writes about our shared experience, which is necessary. You know, when we're growing and becoming an adult, we share this perception that the universe is this way and we're this way. We see this many colors, but we don't see these, and we take that on faith. But we also take on faith that we have Buddha nature.
I'll take your word on it.
Well, I hope you verify it with your own experience. Anyway, it's something I need to work on too. So if anybody comes up with something different, let me know. I'd be very grateful to hear it. Rachel.
No, I don't have anything different. But when there are a group of deaf people together and they're all signing, there's a excitement almost, but almost a felt exhilaration in the language of signing. And the understanding that comes from the communication, which can't be understood if you aren't communicating the way they are. I mean, it's as though the senses are being taken in a different way. Is that somewhat akin to the understanding, like when you said about in the boat seeing the mountains move just for a second, but the way the senses can shift and change and really make reality apperceive it very differently than the average person does, but it corresponds. Is that anything in the neighborhood of understanding in a different dimension?
I think it's sort of like it, but I think finally it's a situation where we can only step into the experience itself that is truly different from how we would experience it. And so to do that that's why it's like a koan. You can't just figure it out with your head in any way. You really have to go into the experience itself to see it. And that means to revise your practice in some way. Somehow, I'm not sure, what you would have to do, but I think you would take on faith that if Dogen said it, then perhaps there is some truth in it, so you can explore that. If it comes to nothing, that's whatever. But if you take it as a kind of signpost or hint to look into the way you perceive reality and not to dismiss things immediately with a label like, oh, that's deja vu, or oh, I thought the boat was sitting still and the land was moving. Oh, that was nuts. Don't dismiss your actual experience quickly with a logical explanation.
Spencer said, quoting Dogen, no, just Spencer, that we have faith in Buddha nature. But we can't see Buddha nature. We think we can't see Buddha nature. We really don't have any experience as to what the heck that is like. But Dogen and many others have said there is Buddha nature. But mountains walking, we are a mountain. We in our world are a mountain, and we are practicing in that mountain. But we only know what we know, and actually we don't know that we are walking. One way we don't know that we're walking is because we don't really see the changes that we're going through, even though others may be able to. We seem to be, practicing the same zazen as always, and nothing's really changing and going on. But mountains walking actually may represent the first experience. The experience of mountains walking is the same experience as of the first glimpse of Buddha nature. Now, glimpsing Buddha nature is totally impossible without an ordinary life. We don't know where it comes from, even though we're told that it's there and it's what our true nature is. We have to take it on faith. But it's only taking on faith, it's not our experience. But at a time will come when you have the experience of, oh my goodness, and you'll understand that. It may be very, very simple. It may be very complex, like an enlightenment experience with all kinds of bells and whistles. But it's the same thing. It's the appearance of Buddha nature, and that appearance of Buddha nature will then, from that point on, will slowly permeate your practice, so that you are always, in a way, aware of the background at the same time you're aware of the foreground. Usually, we are only aware of the foreground, of where we are, where we're walking to, and things like that. But behind us is the whole universe, as well as, of course, in front. But also, it's what we live by. We have life, and life is the same thing, also in a way, as Buddha nature. But that is the big life. That's the life of the universe. That's the life of the grass, among other things. And so therefore, mountains moving, the first time the mountain moves is when you will have that experience, if you keep sitting.
Yeah, so thank you, Peter. That's
Amen.
good.
Amen.
No, that's good. So what I wanted to add to that is, that we are so conditioned without realizing how conditioned we really are. But it was necessary growing up to share the same perceptions of things. But now we're in adulthood and we need to find out what we really see and understand. If you take a closer look everywhere, not just sitting, but everywhere, when you walk, when you are at a store, when you're sitting in zazen, when you're doing kinhin, whatever it is, if you take a closer look and don't dismiss what occurs to you very suddenly out of nowhere, or how you perceive something very quickly and then write it immediately afterwards into the usual frame. If you would take a much closer look at everything, like you do your thoughts and emotions, but now your physical experience everywhere else, you can sort of see through that conditioning somewhat, which you already do somewhat, just to keep you sitting. but you can realize that your own experience is finally the real thing you see and feel, and not what you correct. So we all have a job to do with a good koan. And that's pay attention, first of all, to your own walking, as Dogen says, and not to dismiss immediately anything that occurs to you or comes up in you, but to look at it and not try to explain it, first of all, not explain it away, not even to explain its meaning, just let it sit there and see what happens, see what grows from it. If I haven't confused you all, we can do a ceremony.